What's going on, everyone? Dr. Mike here. Today we are finishing up with our pitch sequencing and then also looking at what these pitches actually do and what they really look like as shown from some Major League Pitcher examples here. So there's a whole bunch of different pitches we can look at, but we're going to primarily focus on the really top four in terms of most often used pitches. So that's your two-seam fastball, your four-seam fastball, a slider, curveball, and a changeup. Now I know I said four and I named five, but I'm grouping the fastballs there together. So let's take a look at what some of these actually look like here. So first off, we look at our fastballs. Now, as the name implies, your fastball is going to be your fastest pitch in terms of velocity. You have a four-seam fastball and a two-seam fastball. In general, a four-seam fastball is going to be your straight fastball. This is the one that you're throwing hardest. And then a two-seam fastball will tend to be several miles an hour slower than the four-seam fastball, and it's going to have movement typically towards the throwing arm. So if you look at the different grips here, a four-seam fastball is named so because you cross over each seam twice. So you have four total seams that you're working with here. 1, 2, bottom, 3, 4. When throwing this, you're going to create a massive amount of backspin. If we look at how that is going to play into the actual trajectory of the ball, the straight backspin should have very little movement horizontally. You may see slight movement to the arm side, but not much. This is going to be pretty much straight as can be. The two-seam fastball, on the other hand, is going to deal specifically with two seams. And many times what you'll do is you'll see pitchers will put more pressure, say, on their middle finger to get a little bit more movement towards that arm side. When you throw a two-seam fastball, you will see the trajectory be slightly off center. So instead of having a perfect four-seam backspin, you're going to have this thrown, and you're going to have a spin that goes a little bit off axis. This off axis here is going to be what actually makes this go inside or go to your arm side there. So let's take a look at what these look like here. All right, so here is Max Scherzer throwing his four-seam fastball. And when we look at this, you'll see that this is just a straight, fast, hard pitch. Very little movement to it. He is just essentially throwing this as hard as he can. You may see a little bit of movement towards his arm side, but still hardly any movement. This is just your as fast as I can throw it, try to catch up, and that's about it kind of pitch there. Now, if we switch over to the two-seam fastball, we're going to look at Ryan Weber here back when he threw for the Braves. I believe it was 2015 and 2016. Now, with a two-seam fastball, you'll see this go a little bit slower, but a considerable run towards his arm side here. So he's still going to be throwing in the low 90s, but you'll see how much movement he actually has with this pitch. Here it is one more time, and you see how much that moves. So in stark contrast to the four-seam fastball is really straight, that two-seam fastball, tons of break or fade to your arm side. All right, let's get into what our off-speed pitches are looking like now. So any pitch that doesn't have the velocity of a fastball is considered off-speed. Off-speed pitches are primarily seen in two different ways. You have the speed being slower, and you have the movement being a lot greater. Now this first one here, the curveball, is actually one of the only pitches you'll see that has a completely different spin set than everything else. So a curveball utilizes top spin to give it an up-down motion. So as you see here, you're creating extra drag in the bottom of the rotation here of the curveball to make it tumble forward. All of the grips you see here are slightly different, but they all share the same basic premise that you're using a seam to give yourself extra grip. Now, I myself personally, when I throw a curveball, I actually use two seams here. So I kind of split my hands like this. So then when I throw, I can actually pull down on these two seams to give me some extra topspin with it. However you hold a curveball, the main premise is that you want to get the thumb over top to create a topspin effect. So you're going to get that topspin to have the ball come down. The harder you can throw a curveball, at least from initial velocity-wise, the later the break or the later the actual movement will be on the pitch. Now we're going to look at a couple of different guys here, Barry Zito and Clayton Kershaw, who historically have some of the best moving curveballs, and we'll see how those really work there. But primarily, you're looking at changing the line of sight vertically for a hitter. So a curveball, you want to start out high and drop low. This can be really good if you're able to place it well. It can be really bad if that ball stays up, because you can very easily leave that in the hitter's wheelhouse to hit quite a long way. So let's take a look at these two. All right, so let's first take a look at how Clayton Kershaw is throwing his curveball here. So when we look at him go, you'll see as he comes forward that he gets that top spin coming. So that thumb comes over when he initially releases the ball. You see him go into that internal rotation, so his hand comes inward after he releases, and then the ball starts high. You can see the topspin coming, and then it just continues to drop down, changing the hitter's eyesight. Very hard to track that way. All right, let's take a look here at another left-handed pitcher, Barry Zito, who routinely threw a very big, long looping 12-to-6 curveball. And when we say 12-to-6, we mean from like 12 o'clock to 6 o'clock. That's the direction the ball is going. So let's take a look at a couple of these. And you really see the movement on that ball, how he almost throws it up and allows that topspin to just carry that way back down. Now, as we'll see when we talk about actual pitch selections, this can be very dangerous, because if you leave that ball too far up, you're essentially throwing a slow pitch right potentially in that hitter's wheelhouse. So you see the movement he's getting because of all that topspin that's coming out way high and then breaking way down low. All right, now we are getting into one of my favorite pitches. This here is the slider. This is actually the first off-speed pitch I kind of taught myself a little bit by accident, which really you shouldn't. A slider is actually one of the worst pitches you can teach a child to throw, and we'll explain that here in a minute. With a slider, what you're doing is you're creating now more of a horizontal movement with the ball. So when the ball's thrown, it's going to be thrown in a position called supination with your forearm. We'll explain that here again in a minute. What you're trying to do is get the ball to spin like a bullet. So you want this ball to spin really in a circle across the the horizontal axis. You don't want to be spinning on the longitudinal axis there. So you're creating this almost side spin to make it almost a bullet motion, and that is going to cause the ball to go away from the pitcher's arm side. Now, surprisingly, a slider actually has the slowest spin rate. So meaning when you actually throw a slider, the amount of spin you get on the ball is actually the lowest out of all of your pitches. But it has a much faster velocity than many of your other off-speed pitches, and it's all because of the spin. The circular spin, or the bullet spin, reduces drag. So with less spin, you can still get more velocity just because you're reducing drag. Now, similar to a curveball, you're still going to use one or more of your seams to throw this to get some extra grip. The coaching tip you'll use, or the term you'll use, is to open a door. So you would take a door handle and you would turn that door handle. Now this is getting into what we call supination. Supination is when you take your arm and you turn your palm up. Now, why this is a not so great thing is because supination puts a lot of stress on your elbow. If I turn this up, and you can even see it here, you can see my elbow moving with that rotation. If I have a fastball, there's really no movement there. If I even have, let's say, a curveball, nothing there. We'll see with the changeup, similar, nothing there. But with the slider and going into that supination or turning here, and you can feel it for yourself when you do this, you'll feel your elbow flexing on the inside. That puts a lot of strain on your UCL. It puts valgus stress on your UCL, your ulnar collateral ligament. If this gets injured, then you would have a surgery called Tommy John surgery or ulnar collateral ligament replacement, or reconstruction surgery. And that does happen quite a bit, and we're seeing that onset become younger and younger. So to preserve elbow integrity, you don't want to be throwing this until your arm's much more established. So typically high school or collegiate level is usually the earliest you want to do that. Now let's take a look at what this actually looks like here. All right, here we're going to have Yu Darvish throwing his slider. So as he throws it, first off, you can see just initially that you're seeing that right to left horizontal motion there. Now, as I was talking about earlier, you'll be able to see, if you look at the spin here, what looks like a bit of a button there. And that's because as you throw and that ball is moving in that bullet motion, all these seams kind of come together on a single point, and what makes that dot kind of appear. Now, the last thing to make sure you look at is when he actually releases, he's doing right here to there. He is doing that supination motion to get that bullet or side spin to occur. And again, that's going to put a lot of stress on your elbow, can make for a very, very effective pitch, but it's also going to be potentially dangerous with actually throwing it. You see with this, he's trying to start that pitch near straight down the middle and then allowing it to break off to the side. All right, our last pitch we're going to talk about here is the changeup. Now, changeup is considered to be one of the safest off-speed pitches to throw because this is supposed to really mimic a fastball. Now, there's several ways you can grip a changeup. Typically, you're looking at throwing it as a 4-seam or a 2-seam type of pitch. So it'll be similar to really what the fastball looks like, but you're going to throw it so that it has more friction and therefore it goes slower. So if we look at a typical changeup grip, you'll may hear the term circle change, and it's all because the index finger will make a circle around here. That's really not so necessary. It's really more about comfort or preference there. What your main thing is that instead of throwing a fastball where your index finger and middle finger are the primary fingers opposing your thumb, now it's your middle finger and ring finger are the two main fingers that oppose the thumb there. So lopes up. But you're also placing the index finger and the pinky alongside here. The whole point of this is to mimic, again, that fastball motion. So if I'm holding this like this with the 2 seams on my index finger and ring finger, it's going to mimic more of a 2-seam fastball. If I hold it across the 4 seams, then it's going to mimic more of a 4-seam fastball. Because all of my fingers are on the ball, it creates more friction. More friction means it's going to have a slower max velocity. So it's going to look like a fastball, but be considerably slower. Now, sometimes when you throw a changeup, you may hear people say to throw it and point your thumb down. This is naturally going to happen when you throw it. So when you go into internal rotation, you're going to have that naturally going. But the thumb down coaching tactic is really just an extra little layer of reminding you to make sure that you're leading in front to throw that ball and getting out in front of the ball there. So let's take a look at what some of these look like here. All right, so first up we have Charlie Morton here throwing his changeup. Now if you notice with his grip, he throws more of a four-seam type change-up grip, and we'll just see what his arm action looks like here. So there's that circle, and there you see that internal rotation, thumb going down. So that's what you'll see out of his motion right here. So here it is a little bit slower. And again, he is throwing that with the same force he would throw a fastball, but because there is so much friction on there that it's going to come out at roughly 7 to 10 miles an hour slower than what his fastball would be. All right, and now let's take a look at Greg Maddux here, and we'll see what this pitch actually looks like. So what you're going to see is you're going to see this pitch start and tail way away towards his arm side. So let's take a look at a couple of these here. And you can really see, if we just go back to that real quick, just how much that ball moves towards his arm side. So again, that's looking like it's coming in as a fastball, and then it is tailing away from that hitter. This is a very effective pitch to be throwing against an opposite armed batter than you. So right-handed pitcher against the left-handed batter, left-handed pitcher against the left-handed batter. Alright, so that is everything new for today. Hopefully this helps with what these pitches actually look like and what they do. When we come back next time, then we're going to see how it is that we decide on which pitch to throw, what scenarios that we'll look at, different counts and whatnot, and we'll keep moving on from there. So until next time, I will see you all later.